Clear to engage. Time on target. 5 mics. Out.
All right, everybody, welcome back. Crosstabs, episode 2, part 2 of our look at all the different races around Oregon. Primary, as I'm recording this with you, Brian, ballots are out. Mine, I get my little email from USPS showing me what's going to be in my mail. My ballots are going to be in my mail this afternoon. Very exciting.
Mine today. So Friday, May 3rd, we're recording this. It's probably good. Welcome everybody. Crosstabs Studio. Not studio. Go to our website. Hopefully by the time you're hearing this, it'll be up. But we'll see. I'm excited for this podcast. I want to just give a shout out and an opportunity that we're going to have a special podcast coming up in a couple of weeks. We're going to recap kind of our border tour that we did down in Arizona this week. And I think we had 16 candidates, representative senators with us, along with some Arizona stuff. So I think we're going to do a special podcast on that, probably doing that one or release that one after the primary, maybe the week of the primary, because we probably won't have quite all the results of the primary. Then who knows with mail-in balloting, what sort of results. But I'm excited for today. Today we're going to talk about legislative. The Salem state legislative, Republican and Democrat. Reagan and I will do our best to handicap the Democrat ones as we can, but I think we'll have a little more insight on the Republican ones, obviously, and then we're going to go from there. So Senate and House. So we're only going to spend time on the competitive ones. We're not going to really worry about some of the other primaries that we don't deem to be competitive. So with that, what should we kick it off with some fun stuff? We always like to do something. What we thought about with this podcast is doing something fun at the beginning, and I'm going to let Reagan set up our fun 5 minutes. Might take us longer than that, but let's talk about these protesters or terrorists.
Brian, I'm reading this headline from the Oregonian. Negotiations fail in Portland State Library standoffs third day. They say the campus was going to be reopened Thursday. It has not. It is closed again. This was 2 days ago. Now I'm seeing the date on this. You think you'd be negotiating with, like, in a hostage situation with somebody who's armed, or maybe you're negotiating, you hear your union is negotiating with management or whatever. No, they're negotiating with students who've taken over a library building, and they're protesting the war in Gaza. I mean, I know that PSU is obviously deeply involved in the war in Gaza. Oh, wait, actually, they're not. They're just a university in Portland, pretty far away. So I'm looking for a newer article on this, but I saw a tweet this morning from PSU saying the campus is closed. It looks like breaking news. They may have reopened an hour or so ago. Brian, what are your thoughts on this protest at PSU?
I mean, terrorists. First off, you don't negotiate with terrorists. You took a hostile takeover of a public building. You go in there, you arrest them, and you put them in jail. Like, period. And I don't get. And by the way, they're not students. Did you see on Twitter there was photos taken? There was some dudes in there that looked like they were 65, 70 standing in the protest line. So
you don't think they went back to school after losing their job, get some more skills, maybe?
I'm gonna go no. Maybe they're online
okay.
students. I think maybe I tweeted they were online students or something that just come down. I just think it's all professional agitators, not even professional, because that almost gives them some credit. These are just losers looking for a place to apply their anger, and their anger just lands somewhere in Portland. And of course it's going to happen in Portland, right? Anytime something goes wrong, people run out to the streets in Portland and set fire to police cars and throw trash around. It's amazing to me. So I think it's really pathetic. It really shows that the Democrat base in this country is really, really off the rocker. And this is the far left base that was against us recriminalizing drugs in Oregon. These are the same people that are for getting free college loan payments from Biden. This is the same group of people. But the funny part about it is Joe Biden's ratings amongst young people has been declining. So I don't know if this is a strategy for them to shore up the youth group, but I think it's probably a failing strategy. The poll I saw this morning, 80% of Americans support Israel's war in Israel over Hamas. 80%. But we're seeing what the other 20% think. That's for sure. And I guarantee they ain't voting Republican. So it's really just kind of disgusting that our officials allow these people to. It's not a protest. They're barricading themselves in. They're following, some online rooms that say, "Hey, go do this and go do that," just so they can get attention to this movement of trying to go after Israel. And I think from a campaign standpoint, I think it's just better, puts more of a spotlight on the fact why Republicans we're not the crazy ones that the Democrats out running around telling everybody. I mean, look at that 20% that supports Hamas. They have a true terrorist wing of the Democrat Party, and I don't think they know what to do with it.
I think that another thing too is you look at it nationally, because it's happened at PSU. That's the one that's been blowing up on the media in Oregon, but it's happened at U of O and OSU, although a little bit less of the extreme stuff. It's just a big camp-in. And I like what John Fetterman, the Pennsylvania Democratic senator, said. Not sure how staying in a tent on the lawn of your university is going to help Hamas, but I thought that was entertaining.
Let's just say, I'm going to interrupt because our favorite Democrat U.S. senator right now has got to be John Fetterman.
100%. I mean, I don't know if he was always super pro-Israel or he just saw this as a great opportunity to pick an issue where you said it's like that 60, 70, 80%. I mean, why wouldn't you be out there on one of those issues? And honestly, he's doing a better job than both parties communicating about it. He said, Joe Biden can't end the war in Israel. He can't end the war in Israel, talking about himself, Fetterman. And then he said even Netanyahu can't end the war in Israel. Only Hamas, by surrendering, could end the war in Gaza. Excuse me, not Israel, in Gaza. And he's right. And I just don't understand why our Secretary of State at the federal level, Anthony Blinken, why the Republicans aren't putting it squarely in those terms. It's so clear that if Hamas surrendered and turned over the hostages, there would be a lot less interest in the war. But as long as they continue to be unreasonable, hold hostages, allow regular people to get in harm's way, people aren't going to be satisfied in the Middle East or here until they eliminate Hamas. And that's taking this back to the demands of these protesters. Like at Columbia, I think I saw them they were demanding some things and they relented to their demands. Okay, the university is going to do what they can to not promote Israel, and then they're also going to give scholarships to Palestinian students. I mean, it's again, whether you support Hamas or you support Israel, neither of those things is going to impact the war. None of those things. And it's just the protesting is fine if you found that the university is a convenient place to protest, but the taking over of buildings and whatever, you're not going to get anything out of that that's actually going to end the war or prolong the war. And so it's sort of senseless protesting, which I don't really understand.
Yeah, you do understand that you just, in this context, it makes you want to just go, why? What's the end game, right? And that's where I don't even think it's really about the end game. I think it's truly about just breaking down people into groups, the communist mentality of just really trying to siloing people and just pushing back against what they consider to be a Zionist government, right? I mean, at the end of the day, they think America is just a fake Zionist government, when the reality is if we didn't have Israel, all of that hate would be directed at one country. And that's the one we're all sitting in today, listening to this podcast, hopefully. So that's my thought. I mean, wars are won and lost. There is no, let me negotiate. You negotiate when you've lost and you've lost. And I applaud Israel and Netanyahu for just not stopping. I mean, you need to squash Hamas to the point to where they cease to exist, except for on these crazy far left universities and these whack job professors and students who want to, somehow or another just fight against the man, I think, for the sake of calling it that. But I think that it's really sad, and I hope it comes to an end. Fetterman's got it right. I wish Republicans would take his line of statements and just run with it. Like, this war can be over tomorrow. Hamas, lay down your weapons and turn over the hostages. Game over. Surrender. That's how wars are over. So
I also think that those on the right, really quick, those on the right who are like, well, we can't support Israel with any kind of funds or anything until we secure our border. Like, that's silliness, because when you have an opportunity to take a victory, like supporting Israel, defending Taiwan, supporting Ukraine, even, I know that's controversial, you should just take those victories. And you shouldn't hold up a victory with something else that you're working on getting accomplished, or that you don't want to get accomplished. Because the true thing is the Republicans have determined they don't want to work on a border bill until they have Trump as president, because they think that gives them a better shot to get a better bill. And that's a fine strategy, but you have to, if that's your strategy, don't then say, well, we can't support Israel until we fix the border, because you're saying you don't want to fix the border until 2025. That's okay, but Israel could use some help now. Israel deserves to have our help now, because they've continued to stick with, the Democratic background that they got really from America, and the support they got from the UN, which was really a pro-democracy support when they formed Israel in 1948 or whenever it was, right? So they've continued to stick with that and defend that, on their, for a lot of, on their own lives, basically. So I think that line too, just to give us a tiny bit of balance, Brian, that is also silly, but no one's out there protesting and taking over a 7-Eleven to protest that either. So
no, ain't that the truth? And I think that if there's things to really protest over, right, this is probably not one of them. As political consultants that we like to call ourselves, you would take an 80% issue in which you're winning, and you would run that thing into the ground until the campaign is over. And that is just the oddest thing to me, is like, why are you jumping on board of a 20% issue? Because we're hearing nothing out of the Democrats. We're hearing nothing out of the Democrats on this, except for, that they just say, well, any sort of discrimination is not good. And I'm like, yeah, but you're not calling these people terrorists. You're not calling for them to be arrested. You're not calling for them. I'm all for peaceful protests, but this is not one of them. Hence, we could go on forever, Reagan. Let's get into the meat of the show, because that's more important than talking and giving these people another 2 minutes of our time, because it's valuable. Let's talk about state legislative primaries. And I love primaries. I happen to be engaged in a couple of them myself, so I will make disclaimers. I'm not sure I will note every one that I am involved in. I do like to keep some of the stuff we do in the background, some of the stuff I do in the foreground. But I think we'll start with what we know, because that's usually always the best place to go. So if you'd like to, let's start with the House Republican primaries. What do you think about that, Reagan? Should we go there first?
yes, and there's not that many of them. It looks like I don't know how many you put on your list, Brian, but I put
That's why I started there, because it wasn't that many of them.
Yeah, I have 3 on my primary list. We have House District 40 between Sue Leslie and Michael Newgard. I've got House District 48, Andrew Morrison versus John Masterman, and House District 51, James Hieb and Drazen. Is that what you got, Brian?
Yeah, those are what I would be considered to be competitive primaries. The only other one that you could probably throw in there is 31.
Oh, yeah.
With Darcey Edwards and the other guy. I forget his name, for retiring Brian Stout's district up in Columbia County area. And I think, you could probably run down that one, but we're pretty sure that Darcey should win that race. I don't think the other guy's doing a whole bunch.
That's what I would say.
Yeah, Darcey is she was endorsed by my wife, Vicky. She's a fellow realtor, which is always fun to see. And
Oh,
Vicky's
nice.
given her some money as well as the Oregon Association of Realtors. I think even Betsy Johnson's been helping her out. So I'd assume that that's probably a foregone conclusion.
I agree with that.
Yeah. So let's go into why don't you give me let's start with
So
40. Let's start with the
HD
numbers.
40, HD 40, Sue Leslie and Michael Newgard. And while we're doing that, one of the things I should have done was look these up on Ballotpedia, because these numbers, I don't know why it is, Brian, but we're 4 years into these districts and I still don't know where they are when they move the numbers around. I really knew the
Oh,
old
like
numbers well, and
locations.
I still, yeah, location. So
Well,
I
luckily you
also
do a
said 40.
podcast with an expert. So, this
That's right.
is Oregon City, Gladstone, basically is that area, that 205. It's in the heart of where they wanted to toll, right there at the
Yeah.
bridge. We barely lost this race last cycle by 165 votes or so to Anessa Hartman, who is now the Democrat representative in that district. So, and she eked out a victory. I would say eke is a very, very best way to put that one, because I don't think she even thought she was going to win until she woke up and realized she was ahead. So, anyways, who do we got for the primaries?
So you've got Sue Leslie and Michael Newgard, and I don't have a ton on the bio for these folks. I'm just pulling up their websites mostly. But this one I would kind of consider, because neither of them, unless you know something I don't, Brian, I think both of these are sort of newer to politics. They haven't been, well-known candidates that I know of before. So I'd kind of throw this in the fun toss-up category of not really knowing exactly who's going to win here.
Yeah, I would. I mean, Newgard he's a helicopter pilot, I believe. Sue Leslie, small business owner. Neither one of them is doing anything really when it comes to fundraising. So I would say Newgard is preferred by the leadership, but I don't think I don't know why one or the other. I'm not involved in either of these campaigns. I think that you have an interesting race to the bottom on this one where nobody's running away with it. So we'll see. This one will basically be who's better well known in the community, who's done more stuff over the life of their career, probably. I mean, because unless you're able to, I think, raise at least $50,000 in a primary, you're really not able to overcome many people in this scenario. So I'm with you. I'd throw it a toss up at this point. I would imagine there's some opportunity for the leadership to come in and probably clean this one up for Michael Newgard if that's what they want to do. But I have not seen evidence of that yet.
I am also can't find Michael Newgard's website. I can find Sue Leslie's, but I can't find Newgard. So I don't know if I am just bad at the internet, which, Brian, as I get older, I get worse and worse at using computers. So that could totally be on me and I'm just missing it. But yeah, so I'm going to put that in the
Reagan,
toss up.
hey Reagan, if you can't do a quick Google search and find somebody's campaign, then somebody's doing something wrong. So
I will say, I agree with you there. So let's go to the next one. HD 48. This is to take on incumbent Democrat Huwe. This was another one of those close races, Brian. Wasn't it like under 500 votes or about 500 votes?
yeah, about 500 votes.
So last time in 2022, John Masterman, who this was a dark horse race, a surprise race. The people didn't have this on their board. This wasn't a top tier $2-3 million race. So John Masterman, the Republican who came out of the primary last time, is running again. This time, Andrew Morrison is his opponent. And I met Andrew Morrison at Dorchester like a year ago. So he got started really early. And then the race was pretty quiet, and now it's starting to pick back up. And do you know how this one lays out, Brian? Does the leadership have a preference that you know of?
No, I haven't seen money flowing in this race either, which is kind of interesting. That John or Andrew haven't really been able to catch fire, as they say. This district kind of runs that west of Boring through Damascus, kind of down Powell Boulevard, Foster, kind of out into I-205. So it's a weird district because there's really no population center. I would just call it neighborhoods.
Yeah.
There's an interesting nuance. There were some claims that Andrew Morrison, lied, fudged the truth on his voters pamphlet that he was never really a Damascus city councilor, that they appointed him at some point, but it wasn't really a city and it was already like disbanded. And I don't know if that's really going to factor into it. I thought that was kind of interesting. A little bit of mud flying, nothing too crazy. The fact that I saw that in the Gresham Outlook tells you that this has no population center of a district. So I think it should be interesting. I would definitely give the nudge here to Masterman because he's been on the ballot twice, so three times because he ran for ESD, right? Education school district or something like that. So
yes.
So he's been on the ballot a couple times, and there's something to being on the ballot, especially in primaries when you have likely voters that are likely going to vote. So I think that you'll probably see a low voter turnout in this one. There's really nothing driving them. I don't even believe Lori Chavez Dreamer's primaries in this one. I think it's around the corners of it. So I think I give the edge to Masterman on this one.
I agree with you. The name ID, I think I do see on his website, they kind of rotate through, so I can't get back to them. But Andrew Morrison's got former Representative Julie Parrish. He does have endorsement from Republican leader Hellfrich.
Okay.
He does have an endorsement from another candidate who's brand new on the ballot nearby, Amy Reiner, which cracks me up a little bit. Candidates cross-endorsing each other in different districts. Patrick Sheehan. So, you've got maybe some establishment, old guard versus a little bit of I would say he's a non-traditional candidate in that area, a little bit more working class. But I think being on the ballot multiple times, and then also just the fact that Masterman seems a little bit more like where the party's going, right? If the theory is we're becoming working class party under Trump, I'd say I'd give the edge to Masterman on that too. So,
and I do know that Masterman got Representative Ed Deal's endorsement. So
he also has organ right to life, and I don't think Masterman has right to life, and that helps in a primary usually if you're the only one. So
yeah, that does. Yeah, so that'll be interesting. What'll be interesting in that, and we can probably touch this one, will be an interesting general discussion for the general race because I actually have the Democrat primary here. We're
going to talk about that.
Yeah, I actually have it on my list, so that should be interesting.
That's
now
great.
The big one, huh?
Last one, James Hieb versus Christine Drazen. And I want to take our listeners inside here. The rumors about Drazen was swirling during the short session. I probably heard it like a couple days before it hit Willamette Week. And the speculation was if Hieb would drop out. So originally Hieb was getting a primary from a guy named Matt Bunch. I think he was going to get a lot of that similar support that Drazen had. James Hieb can be controversial. He's got a great backstory. Obviously, respect his military service, and I think generally he's voted pretty Republican. He was drunk and disorderly with local sheriffs there at the Clackamas County Fair. That was pretty widely known. I think that as a result, a lot of the law enforcement groups endorsed Drazen. So, there's a little something going on here. What do you think, Brian? What's your assessment of this one?
Yeah, I got a couple takes on this, I guess. I don't, Drazen's gonna win it. That's my first take. I mean, she's raised nearly $200,000 for a state house primary, and James hasn't. Let's just say that. I think he's got a couple of bucks from off, and a few other, outside groups. And, James, I think, started going sideways when he was, listening to Ben Edel. So when things like that start, when you start aligning yourself with people like that, that's where, at least, and we hate the term mainstream because I don't think we're mainstream, but I would just say the bulk of the Republican Party or the bulk of the Republican people start kind of discounting you a little bit. And I think that's where James, that's where he tends to go sideways on us is just, he pays attention to the kind of the fringe side of stuff versus, focusing on where the bulk of the voters are at. And, he did get the young Republicans, but I think he serves on the board. So I don't know if that's really fair to say. And he is younger than Drtozmann, so he gets that nod. The real question I have, or the real thought in this race that I find interesting, is just the fact that you run for governor and then you go back and run for a state house seat. I don't know if that's ever happened before.
Not right away, but remember Mannix ran for governor and now he is back in the House. But there's a big gap in between there.
Good point. Yeah. I think I forgot about old Senor Mannix. But so I guess it has happened before. But relevancy is an important thing for a lot of these politicians, and you tend to have a platform. So if Drtozmann has a goal to run again for governor, I mean, it's 4 years, a big gap. So I think you want to have a spot in which you can, try to stay in the public sphere of policy discussions, political discussions, all that sort of stuff. So, I mean, I don't blame her for doing it. I think I don't think there's no blame to go around, but it is odd to go after an incumbent in a primary, but I guess she assumes this is her seat from the get-go. So it's a tough one. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens, but Drtozmann should win. I think James has matured since I first saw him show up in the Capitol. And when he left the Capitol in short session, I definitely have seen a mature James Hieb, and I do hope for his sake that he doesn't, let this blow beat him up too much and, focus on, I'm already talking post-mortem, which is kind of funny, but I think at the end of the day, it probably is a post-mortem discussion. So we'll end it there on that one and circle back later.
Prediction, if Drtozmann runs for governor or Senate, James Hieb will run for the House again, and it'll be Drtozmann Hieb, and that will be entertaining, frankly, Brian, because there's nothing sillier.
That would be a first. Yeah.
I think that would be a first. I don't think I've ever seen that happen before. So, all right. So you want to flip to the House Democrats?
Yeah. Let's go to the D's.
Here I promised my friend Ben Bowman, who I did the Oregon Bridge podcast with, Brian, that I would not make his life too difficult by promoting the radicals with our gigantic Democratic listenership. So I'm going to do my best, Brian. But here I'm going to lay out these races for you. And we've got, first of all, House District 8. And I apologize if I mispronounce any of the names. We got Lisa Fragala versus Doyle Canning. And this one I've titled DeFazio's Revenge, because there was a piece in OPB where Brian Clem and his Oregonians Are Ready PAC, which is basically like a PAC to promote moderate Democrats in primaries in these districts that Republicans can't win, to help bring balance. I think that's great. We need more balance in Salem, and the Democrat Party's gone off the cliff. But this particular one, Clem said, we don't even know Lisa Fragala. We're just going to try to beat Doyle Canning because 4 years ago she ran against Peter DeFazio in a tough year. And caused him to almost lose to Alex Scarlatos, and they called him like a big oil. He took money from big oil or whatever. They basically attacked him as a dirty Democrat, and DeFazio hated that, and Brian Clem hated that, and now they're back. And Brian, I just want to say that revenge is one of the most hilarious and fun things that you can insert into politics to just make everything go crazy, right?
Reagan.
So what's your look at this one?
Reagan, when you're in the minority party in Oregon, sometimes all we got is revenge.
That's totally
true.
To
see Brian Clem and these guys hold this one over Doyle Cannon, I think it's awesome. Obviously huge blue district, University Eugene district. You do have two. This is who can further run left. I'm surprised we don't see one of these two up there at PSU at the library holding a sign. I was here, vote for me, which I do find very interesting because they have nothing to lose, right? There's no purple in this district, right? It's pretty crazy. Money wise, they've 69,000 total raised by Doyle and 91K by Lisa. Both sitting on, which is weird, they're both sitting on 30, 40, 50 grand still in the bank, which is just odd to me why you haven't emptied the tank at this point. Ballots are literally in people's mailboxes. So
yep.
I find that interesting. I have zero idea who's going to win this one, but I'm going to go with the revenge and focus on Lisa because I think Democrats love to vote for somebody who they think is they think the name means something different than an old white guy. So Doyle, even though it's a female, sounds like a man's name. So I'm gonna roll on that one. There's my inside influence.
I like that. Yes, I agree. I think the establishment is trying to line up behind Fragala. That money advantage isn't significant. I will say a $30,000 advantage is not actually that big. You can totally win a race with 2/3 the money of your opponent. That's pretty close. But I agree. I think there's probably going to be some late money here. Reporting is 7 days behind. So hopefully they've started emptying the piggy banks, or they got it started and now they're paying for it. But I would agree. I'd give Fragala the edge. This was the same district. You talk about how blue this district is. In an all-voter recall for Paul Hovey, Paul Hovey gets 90% of the vote. Recall gets 10% of the vote. That's how blue this district is. Even the Republicans were like, yeah, you could probably do worse than Paul Hovey. And with Doyle Canning, I think for sure, just based on what I see from her Twitter, it's pretty lefty. I don't know Fragala, so I don't know if she'll be better or worse than Hovey, but I'd give Fragala the edge.
I agree. Well, let's move up to the other university. Let's go up to state rep 16th district.
Wait, Brian, we forgot the most important Republican primary because I had it listed with the wrong number. House District 12. The Republican primary in House District 12 against Charlie Conrad.
Oh, wow. We can circle back to that one.
We'll circle back. All right, sounds good.
Let's finish up the Dems and then we can talk about. You're right. How did we just forget about Charlie Conrad?
Because it's over, Brian. That's the real answer.
All right, so I'm gonna take so we have two. So this is Dan Rayfield's seat. Obviously, he left. This is Corvallis. It's just pretty much the city of Corvallis.
Yep.
Super blue district. Rayfield, has held this district, I think, for 8 years, 8 or 10 years, probably. Maybe that won't be 10 years after he's gone, but now he's running for attorney general. So this opens up a primary. Two people have emerged: Sami Al-Abdrabbuh and Sarah Finger McDonald. I'm just going to call them Sami and Sarah because that's very much a lot easier for me to figure out. This one I find interesting. Both raised about $50,000 and both have about the same in the bank. I would imagine Sami with $2K left. I bet she just reported sooner than Sarah. It says she had 20 today, but I'm assuming it's less than that just based on the 7-day reporting. So we'll see. What's your take on this one, Reagan?
So here's what I think. Hilariously, they're both on the Corvallis school board. Okay, so I would guess. So here's what I think. They start with the same amount of name ID. They both have gotten endorsements. I think Sarah McDonald getting an endorsement from Sarah Gelser may help, and they're both being named Sarah may help a little bit. So I'll take Sarah McDonald just because in the primary, I tend to give a little bit more weight to whoever the establishment picks in most cases, because usually they can find a few more resources. They're a little bit more effective at spending their money. And I don't have the same confidence in the people I see backing Sami, but I think it could be very close. So I'll take Sarah McDonald in this one.
I'll trust you. That's your neighborhood. Well, close to your neighborhood.
It's next door.
Should be an interesting one.
I will say, Brian, the one thing that could prevail for Sami is if you have Democrat voters go, and this is something you've told me before. I was going to give you a chance to say it, but you didn't. So the Democrats like to pick candidates who don't look like them. There's a lot of white guilt, and this is probably a pretty white district out there in Corvallis, right? So if they've got the white guilt, they may be voting for Sami based on that. So that would be the thing that causes him to win.
Well, and Rayfield was middle-aged, married, white male. So I mean, they could really, coin could be turned over. Yeah, interesting. Well, what about State Rep 33? This is where these last two start getting a little interesting, I think. This one is Maxine Dexter's, right? This is the one where she's left.
Yep.
To go run for Congress. Maxine Dexter is obviously, we talked about her in the last podcast with CD3 running for that seat. We have really three, from the Democrat standpoint, I'd also say three well-recruited candidates, to be honest with you. I've looked at their profiles and looked at their websites and stuff. And you got a doctor, a lawyer, and a CEO of a clinic, which is probably she's a psychotherapist. I mean, you got some horsepower in this House district seat. And from a Republican standpoint, and hopefully from the point of where I would say as a working in the building, I mean, you're probably going to get somebody pretty dang competent coming to the Capitol. So I think that's a good thing. I'll say that from the top. Not a lot of money separates them. Brian Duty, 131,000 raised. Brian Clem's candidate, Pete Grabiel, is that how you say his name? Grabiel.
I thought it was Gabriel, and then I realized the R was in a different spot.
It's in an odd spot. Brian's a surgeon at OHSU. Pete is a lawyer. He's raised 150K, 80,000 or that of almost has come from Brian Clem's group. So that's pretty interesting. And then the last one is Shannon Jones Isadore. And she's the psychotherapist. She got the Willamette Week endorsement, which I thought was pretty interesting. And she's pumped in some of her own money, but she's got totally raised about 85K. So I don't think there's much money advantage here, especially in a Portland district where none of them are buying TV. Right. Just because of the cost. So that means this thing's going to be one in the trenches. I mean, phone calls, texting, probably some mail. Where are you at on this one, Reagan?
I like the Willamette Week endorsement. I'm looking at this paragraph. She's a former Marine, an investment broker, and she founded a nonprofit that opened a 37-bed drug and mental health outpatient facility in Lloyd District. If she runs on that bio, I think she wins. She also, I think she's black. So she's got that BIPOC draw, to put it a little bit more PC than I did previously. So
and a female, she's a female over
and female. Guys, yeah.
So that really helps.
I think that Brian and Pete are going to split the same voters, and she's going to push through with the BIPOC support. And honestly, I mean, frankly, a super impressive resume. So, and I think mental health's a big issue right now in a lot of voters' minds. So the fact that she actually did something on mental health, the legislature, all they do is shovel money out the door, right? She actually did it. I think that that's an advantage. So as long as she runs a competent campaign, I think she can win this one.
Yeah, I agree with that. And like you said, three pretty impressive resumes. It's hard to, I don't know much about their politics, like where they sit on the spectrum. I'm sure they're all running as far left as they possibly can in a primary. But I think that from a resume standpoint, Democrats are probably like, wow, too bad we couldn't have moved these other two around somewhere else and run in other districts, because they do look like they have some impressive resumes. And I do like doctors in the legislature. Lawyers I could probably do without. So my hope was either Brian wins or Shannon wins. No offense to lawyers that are listening, but I think we have enough in the legislature. So the last one that I only have one other one, Reagan, that was the we can touch on the 46th. I think that one is probably the most, because it's an open seat, right? It's got some opportunity there. It's an East District, and I think that one's pretty interesting from a standpoint where you have a retired person, Mary Lou Hennrich, running against a lawyer, and former school board member Willy Chotzen, I'm guessing. So
that's my guess
how you'd say it. So Willy's raised 153K to Mary Lou's 76K. So doubled up the things. You got most of the I would say support is definitely moving that way, but looking at Orstar, I mean, Mary Lou has a lot of individual donors. So I find that to be pretty interesting. Retired to me tells me, she was the CEO of Care Oregon. I mean, she's got a pretty impressive resume too. there's probably somebody there that's made a lot of friends and stuff. So I don't think the money is a huge advantage in these districts. I think I'd be curious to see who's been out door knocking, because I bet in these neighborhoods you could hit a ton of doors, and you could just chuck a rock in that neighborhood and hit Democrats. So it's not like they could just go door to door without trying to pick and match, and get through them. So I looking at all of this, the money side of it's interesting, but I'm not even going to make a call on this one. I have zero idea who's going to win this race.
I'm going to do a contrarian take. Willie Chotzen has more endorsements and more money and has a Willamette Week endorsement. But Mary Lou has a fascinating set of supporters, including, and this is so rare, Governor Tina Kotek has endorsed her. And she doesn't get involved in these primaries. I haven't seen another endorsement from her, except for in the Bynum McLeod Skinner race. She's also got Barbara Roberts, who Democrats tell me is like the gold standard of endorsements. She's still, super well beloved, is always out at Democratic events, first female governor of Oregon. Then she's got like Deb Patterson, James Manning, Tweed Tran, Travis Nelson, Multnomah County Commissioner Sharon Marion, and Rob Nose, Julia Brim Edwards. She has a weird kind of coalition of some far left and some establishment Democrats. And then I would say more of the unions are on with Chotzen. But I'm going to go with Mary Lou, even though she's the underdog. I kind of just think that if she used those endorsements well, I think that she would actually prevail here in this primary. So if she spent her 75 well, she could overcome it's kind of the more endorsements and the more money that her opponent has. So
it'll be interesting to watch how it plays out, because I think you're right, and you sure like to go with those Willamette Week endorsements. I see how you are.
And now I'm going opposite of Willamette Week, though. I don't want to be all in on just the Willamette Week picks. They're going to get one of these wrong.
And we'll move on to the Senate here real quick, but just on the 48, because we touched on it earlier, Huwe, who's the incumbent in 48. This is the seat that she barely won by 500 votes. She does have a primary opponent, which normally doesn't happen. But the more I looked into Elizabeth Peterson, the more especially from a money standpoint stuff, there just doesn't seem to be an advantage there. So I think Huwe wins this one going away. That's kind of all. There's some other primaries out there, but none of them, really matter in our sphere, or they're just going to win, or they're running to go lose against a Republican, and we see that on the other side too. So
Right.
The Senate Dems, we're going to make this really easy. There's not one primary.
Yep.
Nobody
they did everything
cares.
right, Brian. That's the answer for their voters. The Senate Dems, they did everything right. As far as we can tell.
Kate Lieber is the best majority leader they've ever had. She's zero primaries. Like, they should all just tell her she's great. So it is interesting that they didn't get one primary. That, or none of them are going anywhere, which is interesting, because Manning's midterm, Steiner's midterm. So all these people that are running for something else are doing it when they have a free run, which I find interesting. Where do you want to go with Senate Republican primaries? I think everybody waited for it. We waited to do it the last.
Yep. I think these are easy, though, Brian. We could break them down for people. Senate District 1, David Brock Smith. I think he's got a pretty excessive dollar advantage. Looks like when I last looked, he raised maybe 184 between the last 2 years. And so only one of his opponents, Todd Vaughn, has a PAC, 25 grand. And he's got two other opponents without PACs. That really fractures your opposition and makes it hard to compete. So I think David Brock Smith easily wins this primary. What do you think, Brian?
Yeah, 100%. I think that Todd Vaughn was also thrown out of the Douglas County Executive Committee. He was just voted out of office. I think 115 to 5 or something. So I think it's just, but he was endorsed by the Ruck Pack, so maybe he's got a shot. Maybe there's money coming. I'll keep my eyes out for it. But
checks in the mail, Brian.
Yeah.
Sure.
I'm going to go with I doubt it. So, anyways, yeah, I think you got that one nailed.
All right, and then Senate District 2, a hotly contested battle. We've got State Representative Christine Goodwin versus the son of the sitting state senator Art Robinson. Noah Robinson running in this race. So what do you think, Brian? Have any disclaimers you want to throw out there before we discuss this one?
I'm running this race for Christine. My team and we've been engaged in this one. I mean, I think Christine will hit 300K in race by the time this race is over. Yeah, I think she's turned into a dynamo fundraiser. I think Noah's close to 100,000. So this is a huge primary. I mean, you have Josephine County's kind of in the center of it. Christine represents a little north piece of that, and then she's got the Douglas County portions, and it wraps around it, the Jackson County, so Central Point kind of area. She'll win those areas. Noah will win Cave Junction area, of course, where he's from, which is the second largest city in Josephine County. And then I think it kind of comes down to, in handicap in this race, who wins Grants Pass. And that's kind of where our focus was. I think I'd love to I'll give more in depth on this one. And when we talk about, the outcomes of these primaries and kind of talk about what our strategy was and where we're based on here. But I really think what will prevail out of this, I think, is do kind of the vast majority of Republicans want somebody who's focused on representation, meaning going to Salem, getting money for their district, finding water sewer projects to fund, or do they want to send somebody who just votes no and will always vote no and be a no and just be a hard line? And it's not, and Christine's still conservative. I mean, she's got the #1 conservative record for, from CPAC for anybody who's served longer than 2 years in the legislature. So that includes Noah Robinson. So I think, Art, but Noah claims that he was doing those votes, or maybe he wasn't. I don't know, something like that. My little snarky comments, but I'll reserve this one. But at the end of the day, primaries are going to be tight. This one's going to be tight. Robinsons have been on the ballot for the better part of 12, 14 years down there on some part or another. So through 2 redistrictings, they've been on ballots down there. So it's going to be interesting. I can say that. We'll do a postmortem on this one for sure, and maybe even have Christine on herself, which would be kind of interesting for us to talk to her about what her take was on the race.
I will pick Goodwin in this race, Brian. I think that ultimately Art won his last race in this primary against Jolie Wallace, who I think was, a decent candidate, but she didn't have elected experience. She wasn't as conservative, and she wasn't running as good of a campaign and didn't badly outspend Art. So 54-45, I think you change a lot of those factors, and that basically, flips the race to be, 55-45 or maybe a 52-48 if Noah closes strong. So that's my prediction on that one.
Good. Let's just go with yours.
Yeah, I'm sure. Okay, and then last 2 races. These ones are fascinating. We've got Senate District 28 currently held by Dennis Linthicum. He's barred from running again. He's running for treasurer. His wife is running for Senate, Diane Linthicum, against Dave Henslee, who is a Klamath County commissioner and a former chief of police in K Falls, maybe, if I remember that correctly. What do you think about this race, Brian? This one's a little inscrutable to me.
Yeah, I've heard some grumblings from insiders that this is a super tight race. They both aren't setting the world on fire like Robinson and Goodwin have been in that primary. So we're only talking about 30, 40, 50 grand they've raised amongst them. So I think you again have maybe a Linthicum name that's been on the ballot a few cycles in a row versus Henslee, who's also been on the ballot and been around. I think this is the battle of who can win outside of Klamath County, because they're both kind of stuck around that Klamath Falls area. This district flows over to Eagle Point, over in Jackson County, then almost into Bend. Basically, I mean, there's parts of Bend and Sun River and stuff that are in this district. So I think that, Henslee got some key endorsements in Lapine from like Commissioner Tony DeBone.
Oh,
I haven't seen Diane get a lot of endorsements. So I'm curious to see on this one. I'm gonna take the underdog, and I'll take Henslee on this. I think he's well spoken. My wife has gone to Vicky, went to college with him, so she's known him a long time. He's a cattle rancher by
Hmm.
deep down inside, so he's got a lot of the ag roots that are out there. I think he knows how to speak to those folks, and um, I just don't think Diane has really been out there as much as Dennis has, and I don't know if the last name pushes everybody forward. But I do like Diane. I think she's a good person. So nothing against her,
Yeah.
nothing against her there or where she's been, but that's my shot.
I'll take Diane. I'll just say that Dennis being on the same ballot as her helps pull her over the finish line. Probably close, probably not a romp for either of them. And then finally, Senate District 29 Republican primary, Bill Hansel's seat. We've got really three candidates. Andy Huwe is a young Republican of Oregon and got the young Republican of Oregon endorsement. Good for him. I don't think that's enough. So it's really between Jim Doherty, Dave Drtozmann, and Todd Nash. And Nash and Doherty were commissioners in Eastern Oregon. I get the counties wrong, so I'm not going to say it without Googling. Doherty was recalled. Drtozmann is the mayor of Hermiston. How do you think this race goes, Brian?
Well, on a full disclaimer, my wife did endorse Todd Nash, so I'm gonna fall back on my friend Bill Hansel. I like to call my friend. Hopefully, he calls me the same. He told me that was very interesting about the Senate seat because it basically you have Pendleton, Hermiston, and then it goes all the way in really to Central Oregon. I mean, you have Warm Springs Tribe and stuff because you have Greg Smith's district, even a little bit of Clackamas County, which is interesting. Um, and then you got everything on the other side, Umatilla County going all the way up into Wallowa County, where Todd Nash is from. So you have one person from that east side of the Blue Mountains, and you kind of got the other three from the west side of the Blue Mountains. I think they kind of divide that vote up a little bit. I think Drtozmann hurts Doherty with Hermiston, which is their bigger population center. And I think people over on the east side of the Blue Mountains, and that's what Hansel said, is those folks over there, it really is a dividing line geographically, and those folks will vote for Todd Nash, and I think they'll lock in on Todd, and I think he wins, with probably only about 35% of the vote, 32% of the vote. So
Yeah.
might even be a higher watermark, but I'm gonna pick Todd to pull this one through.
Todd Nash, president of the Cattlemen's. He's got somehow he got the Oregon Firearms Federation endorsement. He got Timber Unity PAC. He got Oregon Farm Bureau, and he got Oregon Right to Life. And those are all sole endorsements, from what I understand. He's also got Cliff Bentz and Greg Barretto, who was the former state rep from that side that you said was really key to win that La Grande area. And so I'm going to give the edge to Todd Nash as well. I think you're right. Drtozmann and Doherty are going to split that vote, and one of them really needs to be strong there to compete. And so I'm going to give the edge to Todd Nash. Any closing thoughts, Brian? I know you got a hard stop here.
Yeah, no worries. I think no, this is great. I think we kind of ran through them. What'll be fun is to do the post-mortem on these. It's almost more fun than doing the predicting side of it, is to really figure out why, or to dive into why people won these races. And for me, I love that part of it. I like talking to the consultants and asking them why they think they won. Do endorsements win out more than money? Does money ultimately be the driver? I mean, if in the history would tell us that money is always the driver in primaries, but the least number of voters, the less money matters. So the further you
Right.
get down where you don't have as many voters, money doesn't matter as much. So post-mortem should be a blast on these ones. We might have to make a couple episodes on just doing the D post-mortems and the R post-mortem. HD12, Charlie Conrad.
Oh, yeah. Everything. You could talk about the money, you could talk about the endorsements, but at the end of the day, where I really see what should be helpful to know is polling. When I opened up this email from Darin Harbick on the 20th of April, and they put their poll in the email, I knew things were not looking good for Charlie Conrad. And so here's the poll they put in their email. If the Republican primary were held today, would you vote Charlie Conrad or Darin Harbick? Charlie Conrad, the incumbent Republican who voted for the abortion trans bill, he's at 7%. Darin Harbick, 35%, with 57% undecided. And even though that 57% number is big, unless you do something significant to change that, those numbers, 57%, are going to break along the lines of what they are now, which means Harbick is just going to absolutely crush Charlie Conrad. So Harbick has a money advantage. He's got an endorsements advantage. I think the people running his race have run more and won more of these Republican primaries than anybody else. Honestly, I thought this might be a closer election, but Charlie Conrad's leaning into his vote, telling voters that he was right and they were wrong. That never works, Brian, when you're a legislator, to tell the voters they're wrong. I think he'd have a better chance of winning this seat if he was running as a Democrat, frankly, because that sounds like where he really wants to be. So maybe a little bit of a hot take there, but Harbick's going to win this one, and he's going to win it going away.
I'm not going to disagree with that at all. And I think when you look at polling too, when people, especially in primaries and Republicans, they don't want to tell a pollster, how they want to vote anyway. So the telling here is that 35% were hard nosed to Charlie Conrad. Tells me the real question is, how many votes do you think Charlie Conrad even gets? I think that's the real question here. The good part for Charlie Conrad, I mean, I like Charlie. I've known him a while. I think he took a really bad vote where he thought his principled stand, which I'm still not sure yet where that principled stand was. In regards to, I don't know if he's pro-trans or he's just anti-abortion, or I'm not really sure, to be honest with you. I don't know. But that principled stand on whatever he stood on is going to be the undoing of Charlie Conrad. And at least the good part is he can say he was a state representative. And that's about all he's going to have left, because this basically, in effect, will end Charlie Conrad's career in politics. So, and I can't really say anything past that except for, know where you should be on issues and run either as a Republican or a Democrat. You don't get to be a centrist anymore. Those days have come and gone. You got to pick a side, pick a jersey, throw on a red one, throw on a blue one, and go to work. Doesn't mean you can't work within that party to change some platforms and do the things. But if you're going to run as a Republican, you got to know that pro-life matters to us, that guns matter to us, that smaller government, local control, less taxes, those basic tenets of our platform are things that you would lose in a primary. And I think Charlie ignored those, and that's going to be why he loses this race.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us, everybody, for the second episode of Crosstabs. Tune into episode 3. We're going to break down the local races. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
We're clear to engage. Time on target.